Credits in the economy has always been a hot button topic for Star Wars The Old Republic players. In this video, we're going to be going over the economy in the game, why is inflation so bad, and what is the craziest price tag that has sent players over the edge, making it so some items are so expensive they aren't even appearing on the GTN anymore. This is going to be a long history of the game, so buckle up. And if you remember or were there for any of these bits of history, feel free to share in the comments, or if there's any I've missed, I'd love to hear about them. This is by no means a complete picture of the entire history of credit exploits and inflation in the game, but I hope it gives you guys a good idea of why exactly it costs 200 million credits to buy a lightsaber on the Galactic Trade Network these days. Imagine! The game just launched and thousands of players were hopping into Star Wars The Old Republic for the very first time. With most focused on leveling and just trying to reach max level at the time, credits were at an all-time low as very few players were focused in any way on trying to earn credits and were instead just focused on, well, playing the game. I was there around launch and I remember feeling like I had a lot of credits when I had 20,000, and I remember feeling absolutely filthy rich when I had 200,000 credits. 1 million credits was an incredibly high amount, and I remember this specific figure very, very clearly because there was a mount that you could buy for little over 1 million credits that was going to be taken away from the vendors near the launch of the game. For those of you who remember them, it would be the old Coriolis mounts. The developers let people know who are playing, hey, if you want to grab these mounts, they'll be going away soon by this date. But I remember really wanting them and really wanting to collect them, but I couldn't even muster up 1 million credits to rub together to get that mount. Things were so expensive in the game, or rather players had so few credits, that the developers actually introduced a patch a few months later that made some other things in the game less expensive. For example, it was incredibly expensive to try and just simply unlock Speeder Piloting 2 during the launch of the game, and they made that price lower. You also had to buy all of your abilities all the way up to the time the second expansion released. I remember having to lend friends or having to borrow money just so I could unlock the next ability upgrade while playing. So where are we now? This video is being recorded in 2021, and I'm looking forward to seeing just how even crazier it will get as time progresses, because I have watched the price of items as well as inflation rise steadily and take an incredible incline upwards in this last year. So right now, the most interesting thing is not only has the price of items gone up, and not only has there been a lot of exploits we'll talk about later, but the ability to get credits straight up from in-game is a lot easier than it ever was before. I mentioned it was almost impossible for me to ever come close to 1 million credits when the game launched. Well, now you can actually earn 1 million credits in about an hour just by running heroics. So you don't even have to be super efficient to do that, and you don't have to be a skilled player. Just sit down, run those heroics, turn them in, and make sure to sell all the items you get to vendors. If the swoop event is running, one of the easiest and funnest minigames that the game offers, you can pretty easily earn 2 million credits an hour with zero combat involved. And if you're skilled, you can easily rack up over 5 million credits an hour if you're playing the Red Reaper Flashpoint solo while stealth and selling the crafting materials you get to other players in-game. Making credits is a lot easier than it ever was, but that doesn't entirely explain the incredible prices that are on the GTN now. One other big thing that's different is that there are very few costs when it comes to playing Star Wars The Old Republic in terms of credits. There's very few things that you must buy. A majority of the things that you'll hear players complaining about when it comes to inflation are pretty much all cosmetic items on the GTN. For example, they really wanted that very special looking armor set or that very special lightsaber. Right now, the only things you really need to pay credits for are, if you're crafting, you need to pay 250,000 credits per skill that you want to upgrade to the expansion crafting abilities. And the big expensive item I've seen newer players having trouble with are if you're working on your set bonus at level 75. If you don't automatically get the set bonus through luck, by drops, or through conquest, you'll need to pay 1 million credits per piece for the vendor along with your tech fragments, which can actually be quite a lot if you haven't learned the tricks about how to, earn 1 million credits an hour. Or if you're trying to save up for some of those expensive cosmetic items you see on the GTN. So how have credit prices on the GTN changed over the year? So I went back and tried to look through different forums and some of my old posts from back in the day, and I was able to find some price comparisons just in the last few years. Don't forget that way back then, these prices would have been way lower. So the big item that's actually been causing a lot of controversy and a lot of discussion lately is hypercrates. Hypercrates are the large bundle of cartel packs that you can open up. You'll get a whole bunch of random cartel items from them. These have always been a good speculative item. People will buy them and resell them, or buy them with cartel coins. Maybe they got them with their monthly subscriber reward. Maybe they bought them with cash and then want to resell them for credits on the GTN. And they've always been one of those items that when you're looking at the cost of inflation, you look at hypercrates and you look at Masters Datacrons. So hypercrates are currently selling for so many credits, they can't even be sold on the GTN anymore. They're currently selling for around 1 billion credits, and people are selling them through general chat because you cannot even place items on the GTN for 1 billion credits anymore. This is how bad the inflation has gotten, that a single type of item currently can be sold or is regularly being sold for so much that the GTN can't even accommodate it anymore. That is why when you search Hypercrate on the GTN these days, you may not even find any. It's not that they don't exist, it's that the sellers no longer want to sell them for 900 million credits anymore. So how much did they used to sell for? Hypercrates have kind of changed over the years, so it's a bit hard to compare them one to one, but in about 2017, about 4 years ago, selling a hypercrate for 20 million was considered not too bad at all of a price. I remember when I used to buy hypercrates with the cartel coins I would get from the referral program, I would sell them for about 60 million, and I would consider that a pretty good price tag. And now they're selling for 1 billion credits. The inflation has really reached a critical point. So while hypercrates have always been a speculative item, there are some other items that have really inflated as well. So Masters Datacron is my personal pick of when I have free cartel coins, like from my security key or from my subscription, I like to buy Masters Datacrons and sell them on the GTN because they're considered a very useful item. They're not just cosmetic, they can use it to boost your character, and they also don't come out of a hypercrate as far as I can tell, so their price is very steady. It's based on how many players are buying them to resell. So back in 2020, I wrote a little guide about what should you do with this, and if you want to buy a Masters Datacron, how much would it cost for yourself? So in the guide I wrote, and this is in 2020, this is not a long time ago, I said you can buy it for either 2,000 cartel coins on the cartel market, that's still true, but I also wrote you could buy them for 50 to 100 million credits on the GTN. And this was what I considered a very wide range. Like, it was probably around 60 mil normally. Depending on your server, it could be anywhere from 50 to 100. So on my server, I'm on the Starforge server, by the way. This might vary a bit from server to server. The inflation in general does not, though. It's across all servers. The Masters Datacron sells right now for around 500 million credits or more. So this specific item, that is a usually fairly stable item to sell and has kind of steadily risen, has changed in price anywhere from 5 to 10 times the price in just 1 year. I'll show off 2 more examples just so you understand how widespread this is. The black dye is a highly sought out item. This is an item a lot of players want because, well, fashion purposes. So around 3 years ago, the black dye would regularly sell for around 15 million. Now, it's orbiting around 500 million credits on the Starforge GTN. Wow. A last one is a purely cosmetic item, the Revan Reborn's armor set. There may be a better set to look at, but I really like this one because it's a set that pretty much all players think is pretty cool and most players would want. So the Revan's Reborn armor set will cost you anywhere from 600 million credits to 1 billion credits total, if you can even find all the pieces on the GTN to start with. So now that you know how crazy the prices are on the GTN, how much things cost, how much things used to cost, let's ask, how did it get this way? The big answer is, sadly, exploits. Over the game's years, multiple times, which I'll go over soon, Players have found ways to generate credits in ways that were not in line with how the game was expected to generate them. For example, we talked about how you could very easily earn 1 million credits per hour, or even 4 million credits if you're super skilled. Players have found ways to earn millions of credits in seconds in ways that were never intended to work. When this happens, though, those credits enter the economy and they cause permanent, long-lasting damage. So now we're going to go into the history of the game's exploits. I'm hoping I hit most of the major ones, and I'd love to hear if you guys know of any other credit-related exploits that happened during the game's history, especially any big ones. If you're around, I'd love to hear about your experience during that too. Most players will actually know about the credit exploits that happened in the last half a decade or so, as those were some of the biggest ones. But I found out being able to duplicate items or credits is a problem that's actually existed since close to the game's launch. So back in 2012, there was some type of glitch or bug that allowed you to create vast quantities of credits through the use of in-game mail and trading. So basically, the game did not update server-side properly. You could duplicate anything, the easiest being credits. And so that was one of the first big ones that existed. So this is a problem that has existed a very long time. Unfortunately, with more and more players consulting forums, talking to each other in-game, stuff like that, when the duplicate problems started happening, more and more players spread them, and they got smarter and worse when it came to impact on the economy. So in 2015 was when the first big kind of famous one happened, and this was known as the temple exploit, or the temple chair exploit. So you were able to buy an item from a vendor. It was kind of a gift from the developers to the player base. You could buy this previously missing item, this decoration, from the vendor for 1 credit, and you could buy a big old pile and get as many of those as you wanted. It was a really nice kind of give back to the community, because that one was supposed to show up in a cartel pack or something like that and went missing. I don't remember the details. But what was happening was you could buy the temple chair from the vendor for 1 credit, and then you could sell that chair back for 100 credits, earning 99 credits in under a second. You could also do this with a giant stack of chairs, sell them back, and repeat that, and repeat that, and repeat that as many times as you possibly could until it was patched. Oh dear. So this was an exploit. It's pretty clear that the game was never meant to work this way. Players were taking advantage of it, hoping that no one would notice. Obviously, some good players would report it and be like, hey BioWare, your game done broke. But others were instead taking those ill-gotten credits and going to the GTN. I don't have quite as much documentation from this one, but we'll learn more about what players do with those type of credits later on in the story. So BioWare eventually fixed it, and some people got banned. Unfortunately, that was the summer of 2015, and by the end of the year on 2015, another really bad credit generation bug had popped up that people were taking advantage of. So the next one was called the stax exploit. So basically, you could purchase a stack of items from a vendor and then sell each individual item for the price that normally the whole stack would sell for. So you could purchase an item that normally costs 10 credits each. You could buy a stack of 1,000, then sell each individual item for 10,000 credits each, easily earning billions over the course of an hour. All right, they eventually patched that one, and apparently over 500 accounts were banned. There's not a lot of talk at this time about what happened to the credits, though. And then 2017 hit. 2017 was the huge one, the really, really big one. When players think of an exploit in the game, this is usually the one that they're thinking of when they mention the idea of credit duplication or item duplication or anything like that, that basically made the inflation in the economy so much worse than it ever was. So, what happened in 2017 in Star Wars: The Old Republic? There was a bug. There had been some type of update to the game that allowed you to buy companion gifts from a vendor on the fleet for 0 credits. Of course, lots of players probably noticed this and were like, hey, let me level up my companion real cheap here. And that honestly was more considered a bug than an exploit. I'm sure plenty of people bought those and didn't get into too much trouble, got some free influence for their companion. However, unfortunately, you could also take those 0 credit gifts and sell them back to the vendor, not for 0 credits, for an actual amount. you could basically get a stack of 10,000 for free and sell it back to the vendor for supposedly around 10 million credits. And that would only take you maybe a second or two. You could then repeat that over and over and over as much as you wanted until it was patched. So BioWare caught it, I think it was a few hours later, they caught it and they patched it out, made an emergency stop to that so players could no longer do that. However, of course, the credits are already generated. It's too late now. On top of that, players found another vendor on Dromon Cost selling companion gifts that they could do the same thing with. So not only was a first round of millions and billions of credits generated, but they could also run back to Dromon Cost and do it for a few more hours until BioWare patched it out. So it was really, really bad. And the reason so many players noticed this is because those players who were exploiting did not keep it to themselves. Instead, what they did is they took those billions of credits and went to the GTN and bought every single rare item on the entire GTN. They just wiped it absolutely clean because who cares what price it costs? Who cares how many I get? My credits just came out of nowhere anyway. I actually got hit by this myself. I had a few cartel market items that I was selling on the GTN. I probably got them from, I don't know, a cartel pack I opened or something like that. And I was selling them. And I woke up one morning and I suddenly had 60 million credits in my mailbox because I'd sold some items. I was quite surprised. I wasn't really expecting to sell them so fast. Maybe I'd had them sit there for a few days and they hadn't gone anywhere. All of a sudden I had sold multiple listings at once. I was quite excited. I didn't understand the implications. A friend of mine, however, really enjoyed playing the GTN, basically buying and reselling items, and they had somewhere between 2,000 to 3,000 items listed on the GTN, and they all got bought up overnight. So the exploiters generated the credits by selling items back to the vendor, took those credits, and bought all the items on the GTN. However, me and my friend, and probably hundreds of other players who had stuff listed on the GTN, were not participating in any type of exploit. We were literally just selling stuff on the GTN. We got credits in our bank and we sold the items. Now, when you guys say, go ban the exploiters, take away their credits, this is where things get complicated and why the inflation is so bad. Those credits had already changed hands and changed hands to a legitimate pair of hands. If BioWare had taken away my credits or had taken away my friend's credits, that would have been really, really bad. We probably would have quit the game if we suddenly were out both our items and our credits. After an investigation, obviously some of those accounts got banned. But what happened to those rare items that would have been banned that they'd been sitting on? Well, sadly, unfortunately, those items probably simply got deleted from the game. They were basically put on ice, frozen, taken out of the economy forever on the inventory of those banned accounts. So now there's players like my friend who probably had multiple million then in their bank. SWTOR TV, who runs another channel, mentioned they had I think 2.6 billion in sales. And there's nothing to buy on the GTN with that credits because everything has been wiped out and probably banned for the most part. To add insult to injury, not every player who participated in the credit generation exploit was even banned in the first place. And those that weren't banned, some of them, many of them, found ways to kind of launder the money and hide it in different ways. So some sent it to a friend, some sold it on the GTN to a second account, making it look like a legitimate sale, kind of like what happened to us. Some hid it in legacy banks, which had only recently been introduced, if I remember right. Some had hid it in guild banks, and this was a really, really big one. They hid items and credits in guild banks, which are a shared fund. So you don't want to really delete anything from there because you don't know who exactly put things in and out. And lastly, there was some other creative ways, like they would buy companion gifts from the vendor on Odessen and hoard them away, hoping that the credits and the items wouldn't both be seen. So after this exploit, this is what the economy looked like. There was a ton of credits in people's hands who were legitimate players, who weren't banned, who were just selling stuff on the GTN. And I mean billions and billions and billions of credits that were generated. There was also no supply. There was no items on the GTN to help tamper the inflation of those credits being generated because the actual items to buy were gone as well. So let's say you were there in the wake of the aftermath of this really bad exploit and you had a rare lightsaber to sell. You could list it up for whatever price you wanted because all of a sudden there's a ton of players who have no other lightsaber they can buy, and they all have credits from accidentally selling all their items to these credit exploiters earlier. Wow. So that's basically the really big exploit that really screwed up the inflation of the economy, though there had been multiple ones before that which only compounded things. There was actually another big well-known exploit that happened in 2019, but this one actually affected inflation in kind of the opposite way. I don't know the exacts of who started this or why, but I actually heard that it was a form of protest against the current inflation of the economy, which would have been really bad at the time, but nothing compared to what it is now. So players found a way to duplicate items. But what they were duplicating was very interesting. They were duplicating an item called a Grand Chance Cube. This was kind of like a baby cartel pack. You would open it up and it would have some type of rare item in it of some sort from the cartel market. And players were selling stacks and stacks of these. At the time, you could actually see stacks of, I believe, 500 of these chance cubes that people could buy and sell on the GTN at the time. But because there was no credits being generated, or at least not as far as I know, just items, since there's no credits being generated, this actually slightly helped the economy because it introduced more supply. It added more of those rare lightsabers back to the GTN. And that's the history, or at least most of it, of why things are so inflated in Star Wars: The Old Republic. You can thank all the players who exploited in the past. Now you might be wondering how can inflation actually be fixed? This is a multiple years problem that was spread out across thousands of players' accounts. You can't just edit and do that, right? Well, the biggest fix would have been to go back in time and make sure those original exploits never happened. Unfortunately, that's not something we can do, and that's why the economy is so incredibly screwed up right now. There's no easy peasy undo button. The next most commonly suggested solution are credit sinks. And this is something that many other games implement. So a credit sink is something that takes credits out of the economy. It's not just when you buy something on the GTN. When you buy something from someone else, those credits don't go away. They just change hands. You have 500 million credits, you buy a rare lightsaber. Now you have a lightsaber, but someone else has those 500 million credits and can continue to spend them on the GTN. A credit sink is different. It takes those 500 million credits and deletes them. It takes them entirely out of the economy so no one else can buy or sell them. I used to play a game called Neopets, and this was a browser game where you would take care of your little cute pets. You could give them skins, you could play little mini games and earn the equivalent of credits, and many of the cosmetic skins were very expensive and very coveted, much like in this game. And inflation happened over the years for many of the same reasons, exploits, as well as increased credits being earned over the years, and how they addressed it. One of the many ways was with credit sinks, ways that players could invest their credits and have them removed from the economy. So they would either be two different ways. The first one is some form of betting or gambling. That's where you enter credits into a pool of some sort and hope you get a bunch back. For example, you can buy a SWTOR lottery ticket for 1 million credits. You have a chance of earning 50 million credits as a prize, but only one person can win. If 100 people enter that, one person will win 50 million, which will stay in the economy, but the other half, the other 50 million that people paid into the pot, that just gets deleted and goes away. And these types of lotteries don't just affect rich players. Players with less credits also enter these types of credit sinks as well, and it brings the overall inflation down, though it doesn't quite touch the most expensive items, the most rare items in the game. The second type of credit sink is allowing those really rich players a way to get rid of their credits and get something that cannot be bought or sold by other players, so something that can't be on the GTN. In Star Wars: The Old Republic, the most well-known of these types of credit sinks, and there really isn't very many, is the Dantooine achievement, where you can spend 150 million credits and get a fun achievement and a fun little cosmetic item. It's not something that would replace something on the GTN, and you cannot buy or sell it on the GTN. So if you want this item, you gotta drop your 150 mil down the toilet. Players who are just beginning to learn about inflation and how it works have asked for BioWare to add more inflation sinks, credit sinks, into the game, but it's really difficult because for any time they spend on credit sinks, it's time they can't be spending making, actual content for the other 99% of the players of the game. It's also complicated because these credit sinks, like that fun Dantooine toy item, are going to be inaccessible to a majority of the player base. So if they make it something really cool, like let's say it's a mount, maybe it's just a reskin of a mount, well, that item will simply not be available to 99% of the player base, which isn't something super useful for your game. You want to introduce content that lots of players get to use and enjoy. The second way that you can combat inflation, and something that the game that I used to play, Neopets, also introduced, was increasing the supply of rare items into the economy. So instead of trying to bring the price of credits down, you don't worry about the credits and you just make sure that everyone can in some way buy the item that they're looking for. So let's say there's a rare lightsaber on the GTN, there's only like 3 for sale, and they're like 500 million credits each. And the price isn't going to go down because there's only 3 for sale. They're only competing with each other. There's not like someone to come and price gouge it down. If, as a company, you're able to maybe flood the market, maybe have some type of in-game activity where you can go then earn that lightsaber and maybe list it on the GTN, all of a sudden, if there's 500 copies of that lightsaber listed on the GTN, those prices will actually be able to compete with each other, driving the price down to something that might be considered more affordable. Not to mention, as players happen to win the item or earn it through the content in some way, they no longer need to buy a new copy, so they're no longer driving up demand as well. Unfortunately, there's a huge conflict of interest when it comes to BioWare with inflation versus the cartel market. You do not want to flood the GTN with cheap copies of a rare item that you are also trying to sell for cartel coins on the cartel market, which is bought with real dollars. Inflation isn't some sort of nefarious plot that was developed by BioWare in some way, but it actually really helps the cartel market as far as I can tell. If you see that lightsaber is up on the GTN for 500 million credits, there's a much higher chance that you'll go check on the cartel market to buy it than if it was listed for something more reasonable like 20 million credits, something you felt you could maybe actually earn over time. When it comes to players who like to buy items from the cartel market with cartel coins and then sell them on the GTN for credits, these super high inflated prices are also good for them as they'll get more bang for their buck when it comes to their cartel coins to credits conversion ratio. And while inflation is a really frustrating part of the game, very few players will quit over it because they'll just go find something else to do in the game or find some other type of cosmetic alternative if they simply can't afford it with credits, or they'll buy it straight from the cartel market itself. So for the most part, inflation is not hurting BioWare's bottom dollar when it comes to subscribing either. So while I think we might see more credit sinks show up in the future, I don't think BioWare is going to take the other solution of increasing the supply of items by flooding the markets with those rare items because of, well, the cartel market. There are, however, some other very drastic solutions that could be taken. However, they would cause many players to be very, very angry, and I don't think I've ever actually seen any game I've played do this kind of solution. So one really obvious but really unfun solution would be to simply not introduce any more credits into the economy and let the economy only use the ones that have already been introduced. So this would mean you could no longer earn any credits from quests, or you could no longer earn credits from selling items to a vendor. All the credits that exist in the economy will simply stay there, and they would have to be somehow redistributed from those players who are currently hoarding them all to the normal players in the game. I don't think this one would work, but hey, it would certainly stop inflation if no more credits ever existed again. Another solution I've kind of seen pop up here and there is the idea of having a new currency. And this could potentially happen somewhere down the game's line. I don't think it's very likely, as it would cause a lot of outrage by the players. So the idea could be that credits go out of style. Credits are no longer used as a form of currency. If you have any credits, they're useless, or maybe they would be wiped out altogether. I saw someone make a joke that it could be the calamari flan instead. We don't use credits here, you know? So you do a quest and you get calamari flan. You sell stuff to a vendor and you get calamari flan. You sell stuff on the GTN and it has to be bought and sold in calamari flan that would be originally earned through questing or through vendors. And that way, the amount of credits that are being introduced into the economy is once again at a steady, controlled rate, controlled by BioWare, and not controlled by how many people exploited those credit exploits in the past, generating credits at a very unfair and unstable rate. This comes at a cost, however, of every single player in the game being completely poor. And not to mention, those players who exploited would still have somewhat of an advantage because they have those big stockpiles of rare items that they bought, knowing that rare items have always been a better investment than just sitting on credits in the first place. However, it's not totally crazy that something like this could happen. It's actually something we see almost every expansion when it comes to gearing up in Star Wars: The Old Republic. While credits don't get reset each expansion, often the end game, level 75, level 70, level 65, level 60, and so on, currencies did get reset when a new expansion happened. This always has made players kind of cranky, especially players who aren't really in the know of that this is a thing that happens almost every expansion. But players recover and restart the grind every expansion, give or take. A final drastic option would be creating a closed economy. That would be having all items that you buy or sell no longer have other player input when it comes to their price of being bought or sold. So for example, if you wanted to get a rare item, you wanted to buy a rare lightsaber, you could buy it directly from a vendor and there wouldn't be another player involved at all, and that specific price you would buy it at would always be controlled. So maybe that rare Cartel Market lightsaber would always cost 200 million credits from that vendor, or 2,000 cartel coins on the cartel market. And then whether that's a fair price or not would be mostly controlled by how many credits are you able to generate through quests, rather than who was able to generate them through exploits. This, of course, would be completely taking away the idea of having a player-run economy, an MMORPG economy, where other people are involved, and of course would probably crash the cartel market, as a majority of the GTN is actually cartel market items being bought and sold. I don't think this one's gonna happen either. I hope going over the huge history of exploits kind of helped you understand about why the economy is in such a bad state now, and going over some of those potential, I hesitate to call them solutions, kind of explains why it hasn't been fixed and why it's probably not going to be fixed anytime soon. This was a lot of fun to research, and I hope you guys liked hearing about it as much as I did learning about it. If you want to show your support for these super in-depth Star Wars: The Old Republic videos, visit Swtorista.com/support. And if you want to have similar Old Republic videos show up on your YouTube homepage, subscribe to this channel. And as always, may the credits be with you.